Hi, I'm Gil Crosby, and this session is on one of my favorite topics, the interpersonal gap. Specifically, as I merged Don Miguel Ruiz's Mayan wisdom with John Wallen's interpersonal communication skills model in my book, Spirituality and Emotional Intelligence. So, Chapter 8, Behavioral Science Meets the Toltec Mayans. That is what I'm going to draw from and mix just talking and reading from in this session of my podcast. A Science of Change, podcasting by Gil Crosby, social scientist, author, and organization development professional since 1984. So again, welcome to my podcast. Everyone should know this communication model, the interpersonal gap by Dr. John Wallen. It is easier to misunderstand than to understand, especially when there is tension, any kind of emotional intensity, when there's any past history that has friction in it. If you're a human being, you have past history just embedded in your brain from being young, being little and dependent, and going through the whole process of wanting to become independent. All the authority issues that human beings carry, again, starting with their early childhood and then projecting onto other adults in the present. The expectations we have of ourselves from those early experiences, how to handle emotion, what's okay, what's not okay. All of that complicates your interpersonal communications. A whole bunch of other stuff can be thrown in, like your role in an organization, race relations. If you're in a country like the United States where there's a lot of tension about race relations, gender relations. So there's a whole heap of stuff that makes it easy to misunderstand. And what I love about this model is that it helps me understand myself as the receiver of information from others. It's most communication models focus on being clear and concise, and which is wonderful. Of course, you want to convey what you intend to convey as effectively as possible. And yet, how people receive it is a huge variable. And there's no way to control that as the sender, not 100%. I don't even know myself 100%. And that influences how I send, but it especially influences how I receive. If I, for some reason, have some mistrust and I'm listening to a person, then I'm much more likely to receive what they say with mistrust. Easy peasy. It's as simple as that. And so the dilemma is, if I don't know this model, I may just blame the other person. Anytime I don't like what someone says or does, I may think it's just about them and miss my piece of the dance between the two of us. So listen on to John Wallen's Interpersonal Gap with additional perspective added by Miguel Ruiz's take on Mayan wisdom. So I am going to read from Chapter 8 of Spirituality and Emotional Intelligence, the fourth book I've written. Maybe it's the fifth. And I'm going to embellish on this chapter with my own thoughts as I go. Behavioral Science Meets the Toltec Mayans, Chapter 8. Although they never met, John Wallen and Don Miguel Ruiz are clearly kindred spirits. With their writing, both illuminate the power that subjective perception holds over our emotional lives. Then there's a drawing of Wallen's take on the process of communication. So imagine, if you will, that you're person one and you're the sender. As I am sending right now, you hear my voice. I'm sending. And so I have intentions, as do you. In all moments, we have intentions. We may not realize what they are, but we have intentions. The intentions are private. That is, they're known only to us. They aren't put into the public domain unless we actually say, hey, right now, I intend to be clear and concise and entertaining, etc. But in most moments in life, for one, it would be too much information. One thing about being human is that we have to screen out a bunch of information. There's too much that we could be thinking about the past, we could be thinking about the future, we could be thinking about whether we're comfortable in our chair, the lighting, the temperature, are we hungry? What just happened between us and another human being? Are we trying to solve a problem that's urgent in a manufacturing organization? Is there a political election coming up? There's so much that we could be thinking about. So we have to screen out a lot, and including, what do we intend? If we walked around all day saying, well, right now I intend to be friendly. Right now I intend to be brief because I want to get to the next thing. If we walked around all day mentioning our intentions, it would drive us and everyone else crazy. And we're all crazy enough as it is. So we don't necessarily think about intentions. We have our focus on other things. And we keep them to ourselves even when we do think about them, unless, in a rare occasion, we say, right now, I hope to not get into a debate with you. I mean, there's times when it's actually helpful to say what you intend. But there it is. We're person number one. We're the sender. And so we're sending information. And as Wallen put it, we encode that. We encode what's on the inside into public behavior, the action, which is also behavior. This is the only stuff that in this model would be called behavior. So you're hearing my voice and hearing my words. Words are behavior. When you put them out into the public, they're behavior. The tone of voice, you're hearing my tone of voice. If I were to change my tone of voice, you would notice. It's part of the data we're taking in to make sense out of what a person really means. Are they happy? Are they unhappy? Is part of the message we're trying to interpret. So we're hearing tone of voice. Normally, in most, is certainly personal interactions. If you if you're sighted, then you're going to be able to see facial expression and body language. Those are very powerful parts of the message for the receiver. And they don't always mean the same thing. So people jump to conclusions. They say, okay, you should learn body language and always interpret it a certain way. Well, that's crazy. Sometimes a person might be frowning that you're talking to because they don't like what you just said. Sometimes they might be frowning because they have indigestion. Sometimes they might be frowning because the last thing that happened to them has troubled them, etc. There could be a million reasons why people are doing any behavior. They don't always mean what you think they mean, even though they're useful to pay attention to. If they are frowning and you're talking to them about something important to you, it could mean they're unhappy with what you're saying, and you could check. So how's this landing on you? It seems like you might not like what I'm saying. You could check. It is data. So, but it doesn't always mean one thing. So there, we've got words, voice, tone, body language. That's the part that's public. The intentions were private. We've encoded our intentions into these public behaviors to try to get our message across. We've adjusted it based on our audience. So a useful thing that colleagues of mine added to this, but Wallen never said it, was filters. So the encoding is through your filter. You already, especially in person, have beliefs about the people you're talking to. If you're talking to a room full of children, you notice it. Don't kid yourself and say you don't notice what people look like. You notice if they're all kids, for instance, and you adjust your message accordingly. You notice if it's your boss that's in the room. And whether you want to or not, you're probably adjusting your message. It might be different than what you would say to a peer or what you would say to people that report to you. And so, we're mindful of these things, of course, and maybe really mindful of them, maybe less so. Authority may affect how we relate to people more or less. And it has a lot to do with, are we even aware of how we relate to authority? Do we know that based on, let's say in our childhood, one authority figure, adult, was angry a lot, then we might really, really not want to have angry authority figures around us. Or we might be attracted to that also. And so it's, each person goes on their own journey from early family stuff to how they relate to people once they're an adult. But don't kid yourself. It's influenced. It's not just about the other people. It's also about you and what you bring to the moment and how you see things. So you may believe that things are conflict, that what people say is a conflict or are upset about is a molehill. You may think that it's always a molehill and that none of it's worth talking about. You may think that people that aren't talking about small differences are avoiding things and that they ought to talk about them more. Again, these are individual parts of our own habits and filters that we then are influenced by when we're trying to communicate with other people. If we think that most issues are molehills, then we're more likely to avoid bringing them up, and for better or worse. And so that's just all part of what's happening in any moment of communication. Now, you are also the receiver in every moment, and I mean every moment. I'm sending right now. Well, it's hard. I'm not receiving much. I'm going to have to listen to this, think if it makes sense to me, but I'm not getting much feedback from you right now. That's just the nature of this form of communication. But in most moments where people are interacting with each other, they're both sending and then immediately they're getting messages back in body language, facial expression, even if the other person isn't speaking. And so we're immediately imagining what the other person, how they're taking it, for instance, whether or not we're getting our message across. And so with that data, we're already ready while we're sending. We're already receiving. I mean, it's lightning fast. And on the receiving end of things, it's the reverse of the process. We're encoding. We're looking at the facial expression. We're hearing the voice, the words, the tone. We're seeing the body language, and so we're decoding all those messages, and then we make up what we think the person means. It's just a small percentage of it, especially in times of tension, are the words. And by the way, I seem to have misled myself. So far, I haven't read anything from the book. I'm just going at it. So if you want to know what it says in the book, I guess you're going to have to get a hold of it. I'll gladly send you this chapter, by the way. I'm one for sending out chapters to anyone who's really interested in reading. So, but person two then is on the receiving end. The impact comes from the lightning fast interpretation that I make of what you mean. And it may have very little to do with what you say. You may say a few words, and I might think that what you really mean is you're worried about this, whether or not this thing's going to get done. And you might not have used any of those words. So we're constantly interpreting and making up meaning. And then if we like what we think you meant, what the other meant, then that drives our feelings. So my interpretation is you're being supportive. Well, I like that. My interpretation is you're being critical. I get defensive probably, or feel a little irritated. So our way of understanding others creates our emotions. You don't make me mad. I make myself mad based on how I receive your behavior. And so I am not a victim of your magically changing my emotional states. I am the creator of my own emotional states. I have my own habits, and they lead me to be angry easier than some others, less easy than others. Some people are going to take something one way, others are going to take it another. It's not that there's one way to take things. So that's the interpersonal gap in a nutshell. So let me come back to the book here. Okay. We each had intentions. We encoded into words and actions. The people we're with decode, or if we're the receiver, we decode. And boom, our perception is creating our emotional response. So what is perception? Perception in this sense is cognitive and relies on words. We use words to describe ourselves, and we use words to describe others. This is true even if we keep the words to ourselves by thinking them but not speaking them. We create our subjective reality through words. And so the first agreement of the Toltec Mayans, according to Don Miguel Ruiz, is to be impeccable with your word. Be impeccable with your words. In other words, here's from Ruiz. You never use the words of gossip about yourself or just spread emotional poison by gossiping about other people. Tall order, isn't it? Don't talk about people behind their backs, and don't tear yourself down. It does nothing but damage. Back to Ruiz. Gossiping is the main form of communication in human society. Okay, ... So I took out part of this quote from his book, The Four Agreements. When we are children, we hear the adults around us gossiping about themselves and giving their opinions about other people, including people they don't even know. But now you are aware that our opinions are not the truth. They are just a point of view. So that's Ruiz on, it says 2010, page 38, from one of his two books of Mayan wisdom. Our opinions are not the truth. They're just a point of view. They are a truth, in other words. And they're a valid truth. And they deserve respect. You have an opinion. You trust someone. You don't trust another person. And yet, your opinion is subjective. It is not a perfectly objective scientific thing. And it is subject to error. Even science is subject to error. Certainly human opinions about other people are highly subject to error. Sometimes it's just your role in the organization. If you're part of the workforce and there's a worker who speaks up, well, you probably really admire them and see them as heroic. If you're part of management and there's a worker who's consistently telling you that you're full of it, well, you may take on a belief that they're a troublemaker. And so our role in systems heavily influences how we look at others. And just because a bunch of people agree with you about a negative perception you hold of someone doesn't mean that it's a scientific fact. The only fact is that there's a group of people that are being negative about that person. And that may actually be part of the reason why that person is not exactly warm towards you and your group. We're part of the puzzle. We get what we're getting, we're partially co-creating. We're not 100% responsible for anyone else's behavior, thank heavens. But we do influence it. Okay, so when we don't like what someone has done or said, it's easy to forget that our perceptions are just a point of view. We tend to believe and get attached to our perceptions and share them with others as if they were scientific facts, which is the poison known as gossip. So-and-so disrespected me or another in the meeting. You can't rely on so-and-so. So-and-so isn't a team player. In Murray Bowen and Edwin Friedman's family systems theory, this fusion of negative judgments, secrets, and indirectness is called triangulation. Triangulation happens whenever two people talk about another instead of to the other. Could happen with groups as well. And Friedman wrote a book on leadership called Failure of Nerve, where at the end he said, and now here's triangulation and an index. He said, I could have written this whole book about this. Because when people get stuck in dysfunctional triangles, where they are listening to someone else tear somebody down, or they are tearing people down without talking to them, but especially, this is really important, if you're listening to a bunch of other people complain about a bunch of other people, you are taking on their anxiety and their stress, and you are so indirectly involved that you can't even do anything about it. So you could end up carrying a whole lot of stress because you are welcoming people who come and complain to you about other people. You want to get out of that. I highly recommend you get out of that. Encourage people to go talk to the people they're complaining about. Encourage directness. Do you want people complaining about you behind your back? I doubt it. Well, if you're constantly listening to other people complain about others, then you're part of the reason there's indirectness in your system, whether it's in your family or in your organization. And indirectness is poison. So now there's a way to be direct. If I go to a person and say, well, I think you're a jerk, or you're a micromanager, why don't you respect us more? Then those are fighting words. And so we want to get down to behaviors, which is what's wonderful about Wallen's model, is there are behaviors. And behaviors include when you said this, and then owning my reaction. I felt, upset. Or you came in 15 minutes after the start time the last 3 days in a row. That's unacceptable. I'm unhappy about that. And so anyway, that's getting behavioral, though. You're sticking with behaviors. Far less inflammatory than saying that you can't manage change, you don't embrace change, or any other judgment that is not actually based on behavior. Don't do it. Stop doing it. If you're doing it, stop doing it. Catch yourself. Be behavioral. Okay, so, boom, the process of perception happens instantaneously. I react to you, you're already reacting to me. To further complicate things, our filters are complex, they're always changing, our history together. So the past and the present become fused in moments of tension. My distrust of authority figures from when I was 2 shows up in my current relationships. I have to be able to separate out what's really now and what's my stuff I carry with me. So in order to decomplicate my filter, Misunderstandings are just predictable. To get over it. You can never say things in such a way that people always understand what you mean. You can be clear as a bell, and people can still not be listening in that moment. If you give work instructions and you don't have people repeat back to you what you need to have done, you're asking for trouble. It doesn't mean that they're idiots or something. It just means that human communication is fallible. So here's what Wallen says, his own words. The interpersonal gap refers to the degree of congruence between one person's intentions and the effect produced in the other. If the effect is what is intended, the gap has been bridged. If the effect is the opposite of what was intended, the gap has become greater. We see our own actions in the light of our own intentions. This is Wallen again. But we see the other's actions not in the light of the other person's intentions, but in the effect on us. So I know myself by my own intentions. I know others by what? How would you finish that sentence? How do you know others? Most people say by their actions. And if that's what you're thinking, then, congratulations. You've noticed part of your filter that is common to many people all around the world, because I've taught this model in many nations. And it makes sense to people everywhere, by the way. Most people think, well, I know others by their actions. Well, no. I know others by my interpretation of their actions. Again, one person's hero for speaking up is another person's rude and disrespectful person. It's in the eye of the beholder. So, if you believe that it's all about them, then guess what? Who needs to change? They do. It's actually a victim mentality. Well, I'd be fine if everyone else would behave correctly. And versus, I get upset with people and hold strong judgments against them because of my own perceptions, my own process. There I have responsibility, and also I have options. I can start to question my beliefs about other people and what they meant. It doesn't mean I completely disrespect my own judgment. I need to try to figure out what people mean, but I can adjust my judgments, and I can not just accept them as if they're the facts. So, for instance, take the word micromanagement. People use that all the time in organizations as if it's a thing. What it really means, if you're the subordinate, is that you think you're getting too much supervision in some way. And if you can't get specific and say, look, when I'm running a session, I would rather that you stay out of the room and not come in and watch for at least, give me half an hour at a time if I'm developing, versus being there constantly. Or, I have to give you a report every day. And really, I think it's a waste of both of our times. Couldn't I just give you a report on Fridays, etc.? There's some specific thing. You might you almost certainly will need more from that person also. I could use more information about this. That's where they might be under managing in a sense. But it's from the eye of the beholder of the subordinate. Knows whether they're getting more or less than what they want. And also the supervisor has to decide, well, you want less of that, but I still think I need to give it to you. Or, you know what? Great. I can give you more freedom on this. We'll get to Kurt Lewin's leadership model eventually, but not today. But it is all about finding the right balance for each person in each situation of leadership, which includes oversight, monitoring, and the opposite is freedom. Letting people have the ability to think for themselves, to take actions, etc., without supervision. So there's a balance. in every supervisory relationship. So, it's easy to apply these theories when there isn't conflict, but as this book says, it's hard to remember when the emotional heat is on, especially since your circle of associates will likely agree with your negative interpretations of others, lending what seems like validity to your judgments about the other person or group. So that actually leads to further tension in your next interaction with that person that you're blaming. Does this mean you should never have negative judgments? Of course not. You have to judge. You have to judge for yourself. Do you trust a person? Are you going to lend them money or not, etc.? And the important thing to know, though, is that our judgments are ours. They are based on our interpretations of behavior, but they are not objective facts, and they could be mistaken. Let's go back to Miguel Ruiz here. Don't take anything personally. This is another one of this is the second agreement in his, actually 4 agreements, the first book, 5 agreements, the second. Ruiz says we make up stories all our lives, and he calls that dreaming. People live in their own world, in their own movie, in their own story. They invest all their faith in that story, and that story is truth for them. But it's relative truth because it's not truth for you. Now, you can see that all their opinions about you really concern the character who lives in their movie, not in yours. In other words, they have a character called, well, in my case, Gilmore. And everybody that knows anything about me has their own version of that. Gilmore is about this, Gilmore is about that, etc. It's all subjective reality. The one who they are judging in your name is a character they create. Whatever people think of you is really about the image they have of you, and that image isn't you. Now, it's easy to understand why there is so much conflict between humans. The world is populated by billions of dreamers who aren't aware that people are living in their own world, dreaming their own dream. For the point of view of the main character, which is their only point of view, everything is all about them. We're the main characters in our own dreams, in other words. Ruiz goes on to say, when the secondary characters say something that doesn't agree with their point of view, they get angry and try to defend their position. They want the secondary characters to be the way they want them to be, and if they are not, they feel very hurt. They take everything personally. With this awareness, you can also understand the solution. And it's something so simple and logical. Don't take anything personally. That's from page 52, 2010, Ruiz. So, we're interpreting others. We're interpreting ourselves. And when there's friction between those interpretations, we may take it personally. Relax. People are making up these stories about you. That doesn't mean that they are you. The story is not you. If you care about the relationship, take it seriously. Try to understand. If the relationship matters, follow Covey's advice. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Keep yourself open, an open learner. Don't allow yourself to believe you know what someone else is all about or what they meant. If it's different than what they say they really meant, you have to inquire. Your initial interpretation of someone's words and actions may be very different than what they meant. In the Mayan way of thinking, according to Ruiz, the other is coming from their own dream, as are you, your own version of what's true about yourself and about others. The third Mayan agreement, don't make assumptions, addresses interpretations this way. Making assumptions is just looking for trouble, because most assumptions are not the truth. They're fiction. That's Ruiz, 2010, page 67. We are doing our best to understand what other people mean, and unless we verify with them, we're making it up. So if we believe our assumptions, and especially when they're negative, spread them to others, of course, that's the root of triangulation. So, again, as Wallen said, I know myself by my intentions. I know others by my story about what they meant, my interpretations. And how do you get past that? Now, Wallen identified behaviors that can help one close gaps. They not only help one close gaps, but they help to focus. So these are mindful behaviors. They help you in a moment of tension to calm yourself and to engage with the other in a way that's non-blaming. So it's likely to calm them. Just you being calmer is likely to calm the other. The more tense I get, the more likely another will also be tense. And the mistake many people make is to just blame the other in those moments. How come they're so tense? They have an anger problem. So that's not helpful. That just increases the tension between you. So take a deep breath. Inhale slowly through your nose, down deep into your belly. Expand your belly with your breath. And you will be creating a calming physiological effect. Oxygen will get straight into your brain if you breathe in through your nose. You will start to have calming endorphins and other chemical reactions in your system, reversing the adrenaline that was pumping into your system when you begin to feel tense, when you begin to feel threatened. So you want to reverse that process, calm yourself, not to deny your emotions, but to be able to recognize them and be more thoughtful, to be able to make choices. The interpersonal gap, the ability to really be objective about how I create my own emotions. Through my interpretations of others, I trigger my emotions. I believe they're helping me. I feel more happy and calm and trusting. I believe that they are in some way against me in this moment, attacking, criticizing, betraying, whatever words I might use, judgment words. I immediately begin to have the rush of adrenaline of fight or flight going into my system. That's the primitive reactive behaviors that are wired into our brainstem. They are there to keep us alive, but also get activated in our relationships. And so if I don't realize that a huge part of what's happening is the way I look at it. I see this as a threat, a fight, whatever it is, whatever interpretation I have that creates this to be a moment of danger somehow to me, to my self-esteem, to my goals, that I then get reactive. And so it's not about the other. As Tim Weber said, a family systems therapist, that it was with the Leadership Institute of Seattle, it's the work of the self is not dependent on the other. If I can see the patterns of my own behavior, I can change what's happening within me and between me and others, even if the others aren't working on themselves and even if they don't change. So ponder that for a moment. You have the capacity to be more and more throughout life the way you want to be. It's not dependent on others being different. And that may seem like it's far-fetched. You might think that, well, it's the others. My bosses, my coworkers, if they were different, I'd be fine. But it's your reaction to them that is causing you distress. It's your reaction that matters. If they didn't exist, you'd still be reacting in the same way, likely, to other people. So start with yourself. Be the change you want to see in the world, as Gandhi said, and practice these 4 behaviors of Wallen's, again, which are grounding behaviors. So here we are, mindfully in the middle of a moment of tension, realizing, oh, I'm tense. Okay, what did they say or do that I'm reacting to? That's behavior description. What were their actual words? Not what I think they meant, but what were their actual words? And not to fight them, not to just find words that you like the least, but really everything they're saying. So what were the actual words? And behaviors, facial expression, tone of voice, etc. That's behavior description, putting that into words, what you think they did or said. And also, if they're upset with you, it's a great thing to ask, what did I do or say that you're unhappy with? Let me make sure I really got it and that we agree on whatever it is. What did I do or say? So that's behavior description. Stick with behavior. Get off the judgments. Feeling description. That is putting a word to your emotions. Happy, sad, mad, glad, concerned, worried, appreciative, anxious, frustrated, joyful. So it's putting one word to whatever you're feeling in the moment. That's feeling description. Sometimes that can be very helpful. It can be helpful to you in that it's proven that if you're feeling intense emotion and you're able to name it, it'll help calm your system. The act of focusing and naming it, even if you just think it. And offering that information to others can be really helpful. People want to know, for instance, if you're in charge, whether you're happy or unhappy with their performance. They don't want to have to guess. If they have to guess, most people will tend to guess that you're unhappy in the absence of other information. So clear that up, but with feeling description. The third skill that Wallen identified is called paraphrasing. And that is, so all these things make public information that otherwise would be private. And by making them public, it becomes available to both of you. And so you're able to then further converse about it and understand each other based on that. So it's making public, by speaking it, what was private. And so paraphrasing is making public what you think the other person meant. So they may have said that they think you're doing a wonderful job. Well, that's a generalization. You could help them get more specific, and your paraphrase might be something like, you mean when I stepped in and started working on this machine, even though I'm a supervisor, but we were in a crisis at that moment for production. Whatever it is, just tell the truth about what you think they meant. Now, it's best to take the high road on this. If you think that they meant you're a dirty, no good, lousy, etc., there's a good chance that's not actually what they meant. So the intent here is important. Back to intent. Is your intention really to get what they meant? Then get off your own fears about what they meant and try to get closer to the truth. Now, the truth might be that it's a criticism of you. That's fair game to explore as a paraphrase. You mean that you're not feeling confident about the work I'm doing, or this that will get done on time, etc. That's fine to explore. But if you explore your worst judgments, you just think I'm an incompetent goat, then that's probably not what they meant again. And so that's paraphrasing, putting it into words. It's not parroting. It's not just repeating words. It's what you really think they meant. It's in your head. It's the stuff that's driving your own reactions to them. And so finally, perception check. Perception check is your hunch about what they're feeling. So it's not about their cognitive perception. People confuse this even once they've learned this model. Wallen's skill of perception check is your guess about whether they're feeling happy, sad, mad, glad. The same thing as feeling description, except now you're guessing about the other. You don't actually know what they felt because you're not them. You have clues based on facial expression and so on, tone of voice, whatever words they just chose. And so at times it's helpful to say, oh, you seem concerned about that. Or whatever it is, whatever's true in that moment. It can be helpful for them to know that you're tracking, and actually it might help them think about what they're feeling. They might be ignoring their own feelings, and so that might be very helpful to the other. So to close gaps, the sender encodes into actions, the receiver decodes, interprets the behaviors, the actions, and comes up with what they think it means in a split second without even realizing they're encoding or decoding, because we're doing this all day long. In a split second, we think we know what people mean, what they're about, and boom, that leads to our emotional reaction. And to somehow check for misunderstanding, check for gaps, you have to verbalize the four things that I just went over with you. You have to verbalize what you think they meant. That's paraphrasing. You have to be willing to reveal your emotion. You have to be willing to be clear about the difference between behavior and judgments, and what do you think they actually said, what do you think they actually did, versus your judgment about whether or not they're a team player or able to manage change. That's all judgments. What did the person actually say or do? That's science. That's as close you can get to being factual about human interaction as a human can get. It's not easy to do. We're very subjective. And perception check. What's your hunch about how they're feeling? And what's emotion doing at this moment? Because emotion's always present in humans. Whether you're feeling calm and low intensity and it's hard to even notice, congratulations if that's how you're feeling. But that's still a feeling. There's always emotion present. And how is it influencing your behavior and the behavior of others? How is it influencing communication in the moment? If there's high intensity, just know people are almost certainly misunderstanding most of what's being said. And so you have to take extra steps if you want understanding. If you don't want understanding, then why are you even bothering to communicate? So that is the Interpersonal Gap by John Wallen with some Mayan wisdom thrown in. One of the things that Ruiz adds, the fourth skill, which I really like because I'm a big fan of Marvel comic books. And Mr. Fantastic said something like this to The Thing on numerous occasions. Always do your best. That's the fourth agreement. If you are trying to really understand others and to really communicate well with them, that will help a lot. If you're really doing your best. Whenever you do your best, you got nothing to regret. Even if it doesn't go the way you hoped, you gave it your best. So that's, again, Ruiz, 2010, page 83. And so Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, in a moment of crisis, the Thing had gotten out there and, fought Dr. Doom or something and failed so far. Of course, eventually the Fantastic Four will be victorious. And so Reed says to Ben, you did your best, Ben. That's all that anyone can ever do. And so, don't be so hard on yourself. The fifth lesson from Ruiz in their second book, page 97, it's still the 2010 version, is be skeptical but learn to listen. And frankly, I think skepticism deserves more respect than it gets. skepticism, pessimism. Those emotions help you look critically at things and look for hazards and anticipate problems. It's if overdone, people will get tired of you. But those are very important, and so be skeptical of the stories you're hearing, the gossip you're hearing. If you haven't experienced it firsthand, the person that's being talked about, be skeptical. Even if you have experienced them and you were caught up in the same fear and judgmental behavior, still be skeptical. Be skeptical of your own judgments. Realize that you could be caught up in groupthink about other individuals. So try to be open to each person. That doesn't mean you have to tolerate their behavior, especially if you're in charge. If they, refuse to wear safety equipment, then you have to discipline them. You have to warn them. You have to follow the process. But if for some reason they have issues with authority or something that lead them to continue to violate your rules, you have to deal with it. You have to confront behavior. But know that your judgments about people are just stories and are easily flawed stories. Error likely, as they put it in the nuclear industry. It's an error likely situation. Every time we have judgments about somebody else, it's an error likely situation. And our own judgments about ourselves are error likely. You're probably better than you think you are. And so, frankly, everyone's fabulous in their own being in this world. And they may, we all have flaws. We all have issues. I think that's still going to be one of my future books. We all have issues. But that doesn't mean that we aren't fabulous at the same time and worthy of respect. Okay, so that is it for the interpersonal gap, and it helps to see it visually. So I've got all kinds of materials I can send you, and on my website there's materials about the interpersonal gap. There's a short video on the crosbyod.com website. So to see it visually is a whole different thing, and I hope you take the time to do so. All right, it's been a pleasure. Hey, I appreciate you listening. This, again, is Gil Crosby, and I want you to take advantage of what's available to you. I have many free materials. I am happy to talk to people about their situations, especially if you're trying to create change, either social change or organization change. We have frequent workshops that are available, T group workshops. If you have never been in a T group with us, then don't miss it in your life. Many people have said to me, of all the trainings I've ever received, I got this one 30 years ago, and it's the only one that stuck with me. You're learning from your actual interactions with the other participants and with the faculty. The faculty are walking the same talk that they're teaching of behavioral skills. It's a training workshop. That's what the T stands for. This is done in the spirit of the creation of T groups by Kurt Lewin and his associates. It's for groups. It's for teams. That's how it was originally designed. It is a opportunity to learn about theory and put it directly into practice. Again, the original design, you learn things and then you put them into practice. It was not just all ambiguity, which is how some T groups, most are led today, where the faculty hardly says anything. That's not how this is designed. So join us for that. There's always workshops. There's the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which has certificate programs, a two-year program where you will learn from T groups and learn how to do all the organization development work that my father designed, most of it, and I continue that practice alongside my brother Chris and many other associates. So Don't be a stranger. There's a lot going on. It's always changing. So be in touch, and it's on the website, crosbyod.com. I look forward to working with you in your organization or as you pursue things like reducing gun violence and decreasing racism in our society. Whatever your goals are, the social science of Kurt Lewin guides how to achieve those goals in a reliable way. And so that's what I apply and practice every day and invite you to. Okay, and that's a wrap on the Interpersonal Gap episode. This theory is, I think, the most practical theory about interpersonal communication that exists. If you it hasn't soaked in yet, again, I can send you materials. You can read it, you can listen to it, you can watch it, but it's happening right now. Even right now, I'm sending to you, and you're receiving. And whether you're getting it the way I intended it is highly variable. That's just the way life is. So this is certainly worth really understanding, and then it can lead to all kinds of decreased miscommunication. So you can save time, but you can also clear up misunderstandings when they're happening and you're aware of them. Of course, sometimes people misunderstand you and you don't even know it. So then you got to be paying attention when it's important and inquiring, getting people to put it into public what they understood about what you said. That's the only way to find out. Otherwise, you're just guessing. So look, I love this topic. I've enjoyed covering it with you. Future podcasts already coming up. If you haven't heard the interview of my father, Robert P. Crosby, that's available. Yeah, it's coming out simultaneously with this one. I'm soon going to be interviewing a Ukrainian social scientist who's in Odessa, and a lot of the interview that I'm interested in is what's it like being there in wartime. So that's coming up. I have several other social scientists, OD people, that I'm going to be interviewing, and I'm going to keep bringing episodes about implementing change, whether it's social change or organization change, because that's my bread and butter, and that's all based on the social science of Kurt Lewin. So definitely more Lewinian social science to come, and practical information that you can take and immediately apply in your personal life and professional life. So it's a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope to hear from you. I love to get feedback, and that's a wrap for today. So take care. Again, this is Gil Crosby signing off.